Hello and welcome to the Lewiston Tribune podcast, episode number 15. As we get down to the end of the year, my name is Trevan Pixley, the online editor here at the Tribune, and joined with me is managing editor, the head honcho, the big cheese, Matt Baney. How you doing, Matt?
Doing good, Trev. Good to be with you as always.
Yeah. And we are going to be going over some of the stories that made the year 2024 as we inch closer to 2025. The top 10 stories of the year for the Lewiston Tribune. Before we get into this list, Baney, why don't you kind of go over, how we kind of selected these stories and kind of how we came up with this list here.
Yeah, this is an old tradition at the paper. We've been doing it for at least 30 years. I think more like 40 or more. Yeah. And when the year comes towards the end, we editors put out a list of the top stories that we covered during the year in our area and have the staff vote on their top picks for the stories, vote 1 through 10, and, every first place vote gets 10 points and down the list. And that's how we come up with the top 10. And I'll say with this list this year, in recent years, it's been, at least the last 2 years, it was pretty clear what the top story was. Mm-hmm. Last year we had the reservoir rupture in Lewiston. I'm talking about 2023, the reservoir rupture, and also the gas outage that we had that year. And the year before that, 2022, we had the Moscow murders. That was clearly number one. This year, it wasn't as clear. We had the first place votes were kind of spread all over the place in this list. And
that makes it more fun. It kind of, it sees a lot more stories kind of in the list, kind of gives us a lot to talk about, especially here in a podcast form. But let's kind of dive right into things. Starting off with the number one story, the story that ended up being the top choice amongst the staff was the Clarkston homeless camps. Baney, kind of touch on that and why you think that kind of came in at number one.
And it's been a while since probably the major part of that folks will remember was when there was a homeless camp that was behind Walmart in Clarkston, and that got started in late 2023 and continued into January of 2024. And you might remember there was a snowfall, and I'm reminded of these pictures that we had of this homeless camp covered in snow and people living there, and the estimates were all over the map, but there were, we heard they'd sometimes say, oh, there's 40 or 50 people there, yeah. And then other times they'd say, oh, there's 100 people there, and that situation got started with homeless people camping at parks in Clarkston, and kind of got shuffled around a bit, and then they were told that, well, you can camp at this park behind Walmart in Clarkston, and I think it became a larger situation than what city officials were expecting, and eventually they discovered that they thought at first that area was a city right-of-way. It turned out it wasn't. It was privately owned. Yeah. And so the city officials scattered the homeless camp at that point. And a lot of the folks kind of found different places to stay. Many of them ended up back at Foster Park. But the city put regulations in place that allowed camping at night, but not during the day. And then here at the end of the year, they've... Now, no camping is allowed at Foster Park, and that was thanks to a Supreme Court ruling that allowed a city to not permit camping at a public park. And it does seem as though the homeless population has kind of scattered. In our story that'll be in Sunday's paper, that's... the language that Carrie Sandinay used in her write-up, saying that the homeless population is sort of scattered, and I don't understand how it works really. There were lots of people here, and now they're not, and I don't know where those people went, and it's a tough situation. I think people have compassion for folks who are homeless, but also they don't necessarily want them camping in a public park.
Which is a fair trade-off, I think. There is compassion there, but you don't want them at a public park, being kids are around and things like that. But yeah, no, it was it did seem like it was kind of a bigger issue during the summer, or maybe talked about more in the summer. Where do you think the city of Clarkston is kind of at right now with the homeless issue as it stands?
Well, I think they have taken care of the Foster Park situation. It seems there's still even litigation pending, but it does seem like that Foster Park situation has been cleared up. And when this was going on, you'd hear a lot of folks say, somebody needs to do something about this. Well, it takes a long time to come up with a solution, but there are solutions afoot. We have there's UGM is building a shelter on Snake River Road in Lewiston. There's an affordable housing unit that's going in on Port Drive, right near where the homeless camp was behind Walmart. That's going to be called the Clarkston Family Haven. That's being constructed now. There's a group in Clarkston that's also, in Osoton County, I should say, that's trying to build temporary shelters for people, kind of tiny homes. That effort is still is still in the works. No construction is happening now, but that effort is happening. And then not really part of the homeless situation, but kind of in that genre. There's the LC Valley Youth Resource Center. They're trying to build tiny homes for young adults who have aged out of their program, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. That just got approved to be in an East Lewiston Park by the Lewiston City Council last week. And so there really are efforts about to kind of help homeless people, because looking back on that January situation, there really wasn't anywhere for them to go in the valley. There wasn't a shelter anywhere. There were kind of some things, sometimes the church would take some folks in, but really those efforts are now afoot so that the homeless population maybe will get some help. Those things, like I said, those are a ways off. The UGM shelter is kind of scheduled to open in 2025. Clarkston Family Haven might be a little bit beyond that, and then the Osoton County effort, that could be a little further along, but efforts are being made now.
Mm-hmm. It's nice to see Clarkston and Osoton County are on the right track on this thing, and it's definitely worthy of the number one spot, I would say, no doubt. Coming in at number 2, we have ranked choice voting defeated in Idaho. Conservatives also remain in power in Idaho, while the Liberals hold power in Washington, and Trump wins nationally. Baney, you and I were, really, in the thick of things during election night, with everybody else in the newsroom, posting live elections. This was a big night, and it definitely earns a spot here at number 2, I think.
Yeah, anytime it's a presidential election year, that's always a big one. The turnout's always biggest then. And, it's Marty Trillhouse and I talked about this, and of course everybody talks about how there's polarization nowadays. And Marty's take, and I think I agree with him, was that this election only probably furthered polarization. And our 2 states we cover, this is a good example of it, that Idaho got more conservative, Washington got more liberal, which I think is kind of a bummer that that we're so far apart. But that's my take on it. And it was interesting that the ranked choice voting initiative in Idaho, not that it was defeated, but it was so soundly defeated. Yes. It went down in flames, and that was interesting to see. And the state legislature probably got even a little more conservative than it had been. In Washington, kind of the same story. The state legislature looks even a little more liberal, and no Democrats won all the statewide seats in Washington, including Bob Ferguson being elected governor to replace Jay Inslee, and then the Trump win nationally. That it was a toss-up race, but probably his electoral victory was a little more decisive than I think most expected. Anyway, always interesting to see how things turn out on a presidential election year, and like I say, I think my takeaway from it just more polarization here in our area of the world.
Yeah, if there's just one thing on the election night that I think maybe we should dive in just a little bit deeper is that ranked choice voting and how it did kind of go up in flames. It didn't really seem like it stood a chance, at that point. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, my take on it, and I don't know if this is true or not, but there were two pieces to it. We call it ranked choice voting, but it was open primaries and ranked choice voting. And I think there probably would have been more support for open primaries, that being that, there wouldn't be a closed Republican primary in Idaho. All voters could vote in a primary that involved all candidates, and then the top couple of candidates would move on to the general election. There's definitely arguments to be made against it, and people did, but it was the ranked choice voting piece of it that I think the opponents of it really latched on to, saying that, this would cost more, it would be confusing, and you might not, a candidate that's maybe a mediocre candidate could rise above other candidates who were more on the fringes. Anyway, it was surprising to see how soundly it was defeated. We had a columnist who pointed out that there were actually more votes against it than people who voted in the Republican primary, which means that there were people who voted against it who didn't vote for the Republican primary, but they don't want anybody else voting for the Republican primary either. So anyway, that was it was remarkable to see it go down that decisively, and I think that was probably the headline out of the Idaho elections this year.
Yeah, one of the more interesting results from the elections for sure. Coming in at number 3, we have Vista Outdoors and Clearwater Paper sell part of their businesses to Staples in the LC Valley.
That's right. And not only sold them, but sold them to foreign companies. Yes. And both of these things were long developing. Vista Outdoor was especially long developing. We had heard about that for a long time. And they're selling, and of course, Vista Outdoor is not just here in Lewiston. Their operation is elsewhere in the country, but they were sold to the Czechoslovak group. Mm-hmm. I can't believe I was able to say that.
I was trying to spell that off the top of your head.
I won't do that. But anyway, that deal finally went through. There had been many times when there was set to be a vote on it among stockholders, and it kept getting delayed. Times. Yes, and we don't really know high finances, me and you.
No.
But it was, I believe these were all tactics to kind of raise the price, and eventually they ended up selling for about $3 billion to the Czechoslovak group.
Yeah, this was a deal or no deal. They just kept opening cases.
There you go. That relates to you.
Yeah.
So, the question is, what for us here in the Valley is, what does that mean for the operation here on Snake River Avenue long term? And, we don't necessarily know yet, but there is no outward signs that, anything's going to happen to the operation here. It seems as though it's just going to keep running, but it is perhaps a little unnerving for folks who work at CCI Spear. is the company going to keep the operation here in Lewiston? We all hope so, but we shall see. Yeah. Clearwater Paper was sold to an Italian group, Sofital, and of course Clearwater Paper, like Vista Outdoor, has operations throughout the country, and this was not the entire mill. This is the tissue business in the mill, and so that part of it now belongs to this Italian company. And then, of course, just last week we heard that a Brazilian company has designs on, or is considering a purchase of Clearwater Paper's pulp and paperboard operations. If that were to happen, and we don't know yet, that's still up in the air. Neither company has talked on the record about it. But if that sale went through, that means that I guess there wouldn't be a Clearwater Paper in the valley. It would be Sofital, and this Brazilian group would be the owners of the mill. So that'll perhaps be a big story in 2025.
Yeah, that would be a big story in 2025. I was just going to say this could be one of those things where this could be on the list again in 2025, and it could be a bad thing possibly for some of the people working there, or it could not be on the list at all, and that would probably be the best case.
That could be, yes. Yeah. Perhaps it'll just be business as usual at our two major employers here in the valley, but we'll be there to cover it for sure.
Yeah, coming in at number 4, Mead and Uppenhauer allegedly murdered 2 people in north central Idaho after Boise hospital escape. This was a big, big one, Baney. I remember when this happened, we were on it, and it was crazy. It was a crazy situation.
Yeah, it really was. I believe this happened in March. Does that sound right? And Skylar Mead was a prisoner in Boise, and had sort of. It appears as though he kind of concocted a way to injure himself so that he'd have to be taken to a hospital. And as they were taking him from the hospital, allegedly, and we'll just say allegedly, I forget if they've been convicted of this, but Nicholas Uppenhauer helped him escape. There was shooting, and these 2 guys managed to escape and got in a car, and they headed this direction. And it was interesting because we'd heard about the escape, and people were concerned that maybe they were heading this direction, and I thought, well, how could that be? But then it turns out they were heading this direction, allegedly, I should say. And they came this way, and allegedly they killed a man in Julietta, James Mowney, and allegedly stole his car. And then another man was killed, Gerald Don Henderson, who lived in a cabin near Orfino, and who was new and had taken in Nicholas Uppenhauer previously. Mead and Uppenhauer then continued on their flight, and actually drove through Montana, and then went back down to southern Idaho and were arrested. And this was only in the space of about 2 or 3 days that this all went down. And it was very sad and really random. In the case of the man from Julietta, he was just out walking his dog, and it appears as though they allegedly killed him in order to steal his vehicle. And so anyway, that's very sad, and very sad for Gerald Don Henderson as well. And now Mead and Uppenhauer are in the court system. Mead recently had a hearing here, and his case is proceeding. So we'll continue to cover that in 2025.
We are going to find out more on that in the next year. Coming in at number 5, fire seasons, particularly the destructive Gwen fire. This is when I got my start as the online editor, was during the fire season, and it's probably because it was the first one that I've actively been in during covering one, but it seemed like this one was particularly crazy, Baney.
Yeah, and it was the fact that in the Gwynn fire there were 25 homes lost and 118 structures, and this was in the Julietta area, and there was also, just before that, there was another fire in roughly the same area, the Texas fire, and 4 homes were lost then. And this is one of the more destructive ones that we've had in this area. It kind of rivals a Kamiah fire from a few years back where several homes were lost. And it was an intense few days when that was going on, and there were lots of highways were closed in that area, including U.S. Highway 12, a pretty major roadway through there. And anyway, it was very sad. Luckily, no lives were lost in this, but certainly there's lots of people who lost property and homes and they're dealing with that now. As our item says in our story that'll be in Sunday's paper, it was in some ways a mild fire season because outside of that stretch where there were lots of fires, the fire season didn't really continue. Sometimes it kind of drags on into September, but really things kind of calmed down after these fires. But they did plenty of destruction on their own for sure.
Yeah, and just a quick hit on that. I remember during that fire season, we would, share some GoFundMes and fundraisers and things like that. Do we know how some of those relief efforts were met, or if anything, crazy happened in that area?
I think, there was some relief for folks, and also there had been a request for FEMA to come here, and FEMA denied the request. I'm not exactly sure why. But the Small Business Association came here. The word is, rumor is that they were able to give, and they would give interest-free loans that there wouldn't need to be any payment on them for, I think, a year. And but they were able to help some folks from one of the fires that was naturally caused by lightning strike, but they can't give loans for fires that were human-caused, which is an odd distinction. Seems a needless bureaucracy to me, but anyway, I'm sure they have their reasons. But there's lots of folks who are, still trying to rebuild and put the pieces back together after those fires.
That's good to hear. Coming in at number 6, we got the Lewiston-Denver United flights, a saga that at this point seems as old as time, baby.
Well, yes, the Lewiston Airport folks, they secured flights to and from Lewiston and Denver by United in 2021, and they had always, United had always requested a condition of the flights was that they were subsidized, and so there had to be government money or some sort of money that was used to subsidize those flights. And the Nez Perce County had given some of its federal dollars to those flights. The Lewiston City Council then kicked in some flights in 2023 to cover them. But when United came back and said, well, it's time for another subsidy, none of the area governments would pony up the dough for it. And so United said, well, the service will end, and there's about another month of United Lewiston to Denver flights. Those will end at the end of January. And then the airport will go back to having flights to Seattle and flights to Salt Lake City with Delta. And, this has been a long time thing, of course. The Lewiston Airport, it's now been almost 10 years ago that, less than that, but it was really decimated back then, and it was down to, well, I don't quite remember, but it had lost Seattle flights, it had lost Boise flights, and it was down to just about nothing. The current group on the airport board has managed to secure the Denver flights, which then, well, they secured Salt Lake flights, then Denver flights, and then managed to get Seattle flights in 2023, and now they're down to those two. So it for a small regional airport, it sounds like there's, there will always be kind of these struggles that they have to do in order to keep having service, and the airport board has even said that they're not waving the white flag yet. They're going to try to come up with another way to get Denver flights or maybe something else. So that'll continue to be something to keep an eye on.
Coming in at number 7, we have business closures and openings. More closures than openings, though, I would say, Baney.
That's right, yeah. And let's run through the list. And who knows, maybe we might be missing some few, but here are the businesses in the Valley that closed this year. So we've got Eddie Bauer, Red Lobster, Sherry's, The Bait Shop, Super China Buffet, Tapped, and most recently Big Lots. And this is nothing new. Since as the internet has grown in prominence, there of course have always been openings and closings of businesses, but that seems to have accelerated with the internet. And I guess maybe what's striking about this list is how many restaurants are on here. Restaurants would sort of seem to be immune to some of those factors. You can't, generally you don't order a meal from Amazon. But Red Lobster and Sherry's, both of their chains have had struggles, and that reached down to the local level here. And then Super China Buffet and Tapped, they just had struggles here on their own, and so that led to those closures. And Big Lots and Eddie Bauer probably victims of online shopping, I would guess.
Yeah. Which one do you miss the most? I can't. Super China Buffet and The Bait Shop, I'm torn between. I'm going to miss both of those dearly. I miss Super China Buffet during the Jags 3 wins this year.
Well, and I know The Bait Shop has a special meaning for you, too. We've talked about that on this show. I really liked Eddie Bauer. I shopped there quite a bit. And my wife, who does most of the shopping, I would say probably Big Lots is the big loss for her. She really liked Big Lots.
Big loss, Big Lots.
And then, of course, there were some openings. So on the silver lining here, at the Lewiston Center Mall, Planet Fitness came in this year. So a gym at the Lewiston Center Mall in the place that used to be occupied by Macy's. And then coming probably in 2025, Hobby Lobby is coming to the mall. And there's work being done there. It'll be in the former JCPenney spot. So there are businesses opening. And the Bait Shop, a new group is planning to start a restaurant there. At Tapped, there's going to be an Indian restaurant that's planned to move in there. So don't lose hope. There are some new options coming in, and we'll see how those folks do.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but the mall is under new ownership as of not that long ago, and it seems like he's putting in some work. It seems like.
Well, it is. It's owned. The ownership is a little fuzzy. It's owned by I believe a group in New Jersey. But probably the thing that's most notable is they've hired Billy Scharnhorst, the owner of GNC, as the mall manager. And I think, he's helped campaign to bring some of these businesses in. And he has organized markets at the mall and in the hallways of the mall. And those have especially been popular at Christmas time. And a lot of vendors will set up a booth and sell all kinds of handmade goods and food and books and all kinds of things, and those seem like they've been pretty popular.
Yeah, it's cool to see the Lewiston Mall kind of, have some bodies in it. It's been a long time since we've seen that. So.
That's true, yes.
Coming in at number 8, we got the deep freeze in January coincides with Avista asking residents to conserve gas. Baney, what do you recall from this?
Well, and this is, it's been a little while. That was in January of this year. And, this is not to be confused with the November 2023 gas outage, which happened when a gas pipeline was hit near Pullman. And in that case, there just wasn't any natural gas. So you were just out of luck if you needed a warm shower or heat in your house if you were on gas. This was in January of this year, and it was easily the coldest stretch of last winter. And even in Lewiston, temperatures were right around 0. And they were sub-zero in areas around us, and I'm not exactly sure, but the bitterly cold temperatures I believe did have some role to play. But Avista, they had some equipment malfunctions, so there still was natural gas, but they asked residents to please conserve, which was a little difficult from residents' perspective. It's easily the coldest stretch of the year, and they're saying, please don't use the gas.
Exactly.
So, that was... luckily, it was just a few days, but it was pretty memorable, and it probably didn't help that it came, just a few months after the gas outage that had happened, and it was what's striking to me about that gas outage, them asking to conserve gas, the water restrictions that happened after the reservoir collapse in 2023, the fact that I think in this country we kind of get complacent about the fact that you can turn on the heat and it turns on, turn on the water and it turns on. Even in this country, those aren't always guaranteed. And so it's, it at least gave me an appreciation that so often you can just rely on those things.
Exactly.
It's not always the case, though,
Yeah. Knock on wood that this January goes a little bit better when it comes to gas here in the valley.
Yes.
Coming in at number 9, what a fall off for this guy. Number 1 in 2022, all the way to number 9 in 2024. Coburger's case moved to Boise continues to grind along, Baney.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks are probably just saying, let's just get to the trial here. Yeah. And of course, the legal matters always take a long time to play out, longer than most observers would want them to. But the Coburger case in 2024, there wasn't a ton of news about it. Probably the big news was that it got moved from Latah County to Ada County. And anyway, it will proceed there. It was moved because the defense successfully argued that there wasn't a big enough jury pool in Latah County to handle the case, and also the facilities at the Latah County Courthouse weren't sufficient for a case of this stature, and so it's moved to Ada County, and it's scheduled to get started in August of 2025. We'll see if that happens, but of course, by the time it starts, or it's scheduled to start, it will be almost 3 years since the murders that happened on November 13th, 2022. And, of course, the families, I think, are eager to see this matter resolved. And certainly folks in Latah County and around this region, around the state, around the country, around the world are eager to see it resolved.
Yeah, for sure. And then to cap off the list at number 10, the Salmon and Dam saga continues, man.
Well, and this is one of our staples. This is such a long-standing thing, of course. Folks, there are folks, of course, who would like to see the 4 lower Snake River dams breached in order to allow wild salmon and steelhead to those runs to recover, and other folks who see the great benefit in having those dams in place for tug and barge transportation. Without those dams, Lewiston's status as a seaport would no longer be the case. It's only those dams that make it possible. And this year, there was a pause was put in place on lawsuits between the parties, with the idea being that they could maybe mediate some sort of solution. And then right near the end of the year, a study about the dams was reopened for new evaluation, and we'll see how that goes. Now, the runs this year weren't too bad, not great, but better than some previous results. These are the wild fish numbers. And looking forward into the new year, we'll see how much the Trump administration, what sort of influence they have on the situation. There may be measures in Congress that make potential breaching of the dams much harder. It may be enshrined into law that breaching isn't allowed, perhaps. But anyway, there's no end in sight to this saga. I think as long as there are dams on this river, this will continue to be something that we cover.
Well, that's going to put a bow on this one with our top 10 stories of the year for the Lewiston Tribune. It was a little bit of a longer one here, Baney, but when you're going over 10 of the top stories of the year, I think it warrants a little bit of time.
Well, what was your top story in your life in 2024?
The top story of my life in 2024? Getting engaged
to
my girlfriend.
Congratulations.
Renee, my fiance now.
Yes.
It's still hard to keep saying. Yeah. Fiance is a weird term, I feel like. That in between wife and girlfriend. But yeah, so Christmas Eve, engaged to my girlfriend. What about you?
Well, nothing exciting as that. I guess I did become the Tribune's managing editor.
Hey, that is true. You're not the city editor.
No, not anymore. And that's been interesting, but another good year with my family and my kids, and it's we've started this podcast here in 2024.
That's
and
true.
We want to keep it going, and maybe we're going to get it onto some new platforms so that it's maybe a little more easily accessible for our listeners.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to grow digitally as a brand here at the Lewiston Tribune.
That's right, yes, and we certainly appreciate everybody who listens to the podcast and who reads the paper both in print and online, and we'll see. We're doing our best to move into the modern era, and we'll see. Maybe have some new wrinkles in 2025 for our folks.
We're sure gonna try. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode number 15 of the podcast, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.